Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormley, joined as I am every Friday morning by Andrew Erickson and Derek Brown. Debra, how are you feeling after last night's wonderful Thursday night football game?
It's a treat to watch Mariota play football because it shows me that after watching Patrick Mahomes highlights, I'm not the only person in the world that looks like a fool when I play football.
You don't look like a fool. Don't you remember our team trip in March?
No.
You were QB1.
Hey, I'm trying to be modest here, Warmly. I know that I was the best and I was throwing darts out there. There is no contestation. Although, if Chris listens to this episode, he'll have a bone to pick. But that's life.
I had that same thought in mind. I knew our producer, Chris, was not going to be happy when I called you QB1. Erickson was probably wide receiver one. He certainly did better in our flag football games than Kyle Pitts did last night, than DJ Moore did last night. Thankfully, we finally have a Friday where we don't have to preview and ask, should we start DJ Moore or Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a darn shame that these uber-talented players are just being held back by their offenses that they play in. Kyle Pitts is on pace for 2,000 air yards this season and, 50 receiving yards, it looks like at this point. So, look, people, if he comes down with one of those passes, he's going to be a top 5 tight end of the week. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, you got to keep playing him. He's out there, and you're just hoping he catches one of these deep balls from Marcus Mariota. But it's not looking great.
Yeah, we've been hoping for that for 2.5 months at this point. Before we get into the show, I want to thank all the veterans and anybody who served that are listening. Today is Veterans Day, and we appreciate you every single day, and just thank you for the sacrifices you and your families have made for us. And thank you for tuning into the show, and have a good Veterans Day. Let's make sure everybody can find the three of us online. Debro's Twitter handle is @Debro_FFB. Erickson is @Andrew Erickson_, and I am @Ryan Wormley. And of course, we can be found everywhere online @FantasyPros. I also want to take a quick moment to tell you guys about My Playbook's Autopilot tool. Autopilot makes it incredibly easy to manage your lineups across all of your leagues. It sends emails on suggested lineup changes and can auto-swap inactive players out for you. You can even turn on full autopilot to have your optimal lineup set automatically each and every week. I know tons of people who use this feature when they're traveling or have family plans on Sunday, or even just want to make sure they're optimizing their lineup every week. So follow their lead and automate your lineup management for all your leagues with Autopilot over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. You have to be an MVP or Hall of Fame subscriber to use Autopilot. So if you're not currently a subscriber, then we've got an amazing offer that gets you premium for 6 full months without paying us a dime. You can check out that deal at fantasypros.com/offers. Guys, 4 teams on bye this week. All of them have winning records, so that should make for a fun slate. The Patriots, the Jets, the Bengals, and of course my Ravens. We also have a standalone early game again this week, only instead of being in London, we're in Germany for Seahawks at Bucks. Erickson, what's the key matchup here?
Yeah, very excited about this game being played in Munich. So I'm excited to wake up and watch it. And I'm going to be looking for Chris Godwin against the Seattle secondary. #Das Boot. So Godwin basically has been peppered with targets over the last 4 weeks. 46 targets in total, 11.5 per game. And he's wide receiver 35 in points per game, averaging just under 10 fantasy points. So no touchdowns for Chris Godwin. So maybe what he needs is to get off American soil, get on to nice Germany. Last year we saw Kyle Pitts get off the touchdown snide, going for a touchdown in London in his only score of the entire season as a rookie. So maybe the change of scenery will work for Chris Godwin. And the matchup definitely plays into his favor against the Seahawks secondary that is just forcing targets to the middle of the field. Seattle's defense ranked number 1 in fewest fantasy points allowed to the perimeter wide receiver, but 15th allowed to the slot. That's because of slot cornerback Kobe Bryant, ranked 2nd in yards and catches allowed from the inside this season. So with the tight end position kind of in flux in Tampa Bay with Cade Otton and Cameron Brate kind of splitting reps, I think you're going to see a lot more of Chris Godwin and Tom Brady potentially hooking up in the red zone. You also have Mike Evans is dealing with a rib injury, so he's going to gut it out in this matchup here before the team's bye week, but I think that he's probably going to play more of a, he's going to be out there trying to gain coverage, but like I mentioned before, they're really good against the perimeter. So I'm not expecting a big Mike Evans game. Therefore, I think it's going to be a big game for Chris Godwin, and you're going to feel good about keeping it in your lineup this week.
Debra, what are you looking at in this one?
I mean, same as far as like looking at the wide receivers, and if Seattle's going to keep up on the other side with the Buccaneers, I'm with Erickson. I think it's a big Godwin game. I think Tyler Lockett's going to have to be the centerpiece to their offense. Looking at Tyler Lockett, and this comes down to a weekly discussion, guys. And I mean, you got the Tampa Bay guys. Is it a Godwin week? Is it an Evans week? Now we have Seattle. Is it a Lockett week? Is it a Metcalf week? Every time that Seattle plays a team that is high in zone coverage, just ride with Tyler Lockett, baby. And that's exactly what we're going to see with Tampa Bay. Their outside corners have played zone on 63 to 67% of their snaps. Now, you look at Lockett, that's where 58% of his target volume has come, and he is quietly one of the best wide receivers in the league against zone coverage. 10th in PFF receiving grade, 12th in yards per route run. I think if Seattle has a chance in this game, it's going to be back on the back of Tyler Lockett.
So we've obviously seen a lot of games in London. Again, this is the first one we've seen in Germany. When you guys have these like games that are taking place in Europe, and it's just such a different routine for both the offenses and defenses traveling, which side do you think usually has a benefit? Do you think that this is likely to be a lower scoring game given all the travels and international, setup, or do you think it's maybe more likely to be higher scoring, Erickson?
I definitely would probably lean more towards lower scoring, especially just based on the two teams that are playing in this particular game. I mean, the Buccaneers offense has just been underwhelming all year long, and they've struggled in the red zone. Seattle's defense isn't great in the red zone. It's not like the Rams especially, so I do think that they will end up scoring some points here. But, I mean, it seems like the majority of games internationally usually underwhelm from a scoring perspective anyway, and that would make sense just based on all the different things at play. And you would expect things to kind of come out slow out of the gates, and then things start to heat up during the second half. So I would probably go under on the total.
Debro, do you agree with that?
Well, I do think we need a little bit of context here. I mean, half of the games across the pond have been all Jaguars games, so some of the low scoring. But I'm with Erickson on that because, I mean, look, we're all creatures of habit. You take teams and you take players out of normal habits as far as travel and home games and home teams and things of that nature. I think you're going to see a difference in it. So, yeah, I would lean to the unders.
Let's move to our next game, and it has the potential to be a really fun one, but there's obviously a key injury here. Vikings at Bills. Debro, what's the key matchup?
So I think the Vikings can have their way with the Bills' run defense. And honestly, if they want to just take this game, regardless of whether Josh Allen plays or he doesn't, take this game or at least try to take it out of his hands more, I think that their winning formula is on the back of Dalvin Cook and to run the ball down the Bills' throats. And I think they quietly can do that. If you look at the Bills' run defense, yes, they started off the season immensely good. But since week 4, this has been a team that's transformed into a team that you can run on. They are 19th in rushing yards per game, 21st in EPA per rush, and 30th in explosive run rate. So if the Vikings, look, we know Kirk Cousins' problems against pressure, as well as the strength of the Bills' defense is in the secondary. The Vikings could easily just keep the ball on the ground and win this ball game.
Erickson, Debro mentioned Josh Allen, of course, the key injury I was referring to. As of right now, Friday morning when we're recording this, I think the last update you said you saw was he's hour to hour. So this information could change rapidly. So just be keeping an eye on that. That's another great reason to use FantasyPros Autopilot in case he is a last-minute scratch on Sunday. But, I mean, what do you make of this passing game, just given what we know right now about Josh Allen's health?
Yeah, another update just kind of came in. It said that he's scheduled to practice today on Friday, so it's still up in the air. They're probably going to just play this down to the wire, so we're probably not going to know until at least Sunday morning at the earliest, or right before the inactives are released. So you just got to wait. But in the meantime, I kind of want to just break down what the potential would look like if Case Keenum is under center, because I think that's really the biggest question mark. Because if Josh Allen's playing, like you're playing him, you're playing everyone else that you would normally play on the Bills. I don't think there's a lot of question marks, but obviously Case Keenum coming in does change the dynamic significantly. But Keenum, I think that he can still run the offense to be efficient. He started 2 games last year for the Browns. He averaged just under 200 passing yards and 1.5 passing touchdowns. I'm not concerned about Stephon Diggs in any way. These guys have chemistry going back to the days in Minnesota, so I'm not really worried about moving. Maybe I dock him down a little bit in the rankings, but he's still going to be a wide receiver 1 regardless of who is under center. Gabe Davis kind of falls to the wayside a little bit. He's just been too boomer bust anyway with Josh Allen, and then you're taking him out, with Josh Allen's big arm. I think Gabe Davis is someone to try to lean away from unless I'm trying to shoot for a guy that can get 30 points. It's just the chance of that happening without Josh Allen is just very unlikely. And same thing with Dawson Knox, just very fringy plays that it's just harder to buy into with Josh Allen out of the lineup. When you look at the Vikings defense in terms of, okay, is there any streaming options from this receiving core? I mean, Isaiah McKenzie did see his snaps increase last week, and Chandon Sullivan, oh my God, this dude is horrible in the slot for the Vikings. Most receiving yards allowed from the slot this season. And when you look at Case Keenum, in those 2 games he started for the Browns last year, his number 1 target and the guy he was peppering with looks was Jarvis Landry. Like, Jarvis Landry was very productive in the 2 games for the Browns as the Browns' number 1 slot receiver. So Isaiah McKenzie, who's kind of underwhelmed, honestly, with Josh Allen at quarterback, I would actually not be surprised to see him have a productive game with the matchup, give him a new quarterback under center that has shown that he's going to pepper the slot with targets and potentially have better chemistry than what we've seen with Isaiah McKenzie and Josh Allen, which really hasn't been a thing. And just kind of list off another part of this offense is Devin Singletary. I know Debro and I talked about Devin Singletary on the Start Sit show. And basically, I look at Singletary as, look, Josh Allen takes up all the red zone attempts in this offense. And he's the reason why Devin Singletary never scores points, because he never scores touchdowns. So if there's ever a game where Devin Singletary could score double-digit touchdowns in an offense that I still think is going to be able to move the ball, because I don't think the Vikings defense is just this suffocating unit, then this is the week to play Devin Singletary, because he actually has a chance to score touchdowns in this game. It's not like the Bills are going to get shut out against the Vikings. So Devin Singletary leads the team in red zone opportunities. Even if Josh Allen's playing, I can't imagine, like, all right, we're going to use power I formation with Josh Allen when he's banged up with his elbow. I think they would give the ball to Devin Singletary. So I'm not trying to necessarily bench Singletary. I think actually a little bit more upside than people would give him credit for if Josh Allen was actually in the lineup.
Really quickly before we move on for this game, because you mentioned basically everybody in the offense except Nyheim Hines. You know, when you have a mobile quarterback like Josh Allen, they often will scramble instead of just checking down to the running back. And Nyheim Hines is a pass-catching running back. They brought him over to use him, obviously. Do you think if Josh Allen's out that we might actually see some more usage for him in the passing game just from checkdowns from Case Keenum?
I mean, it would make sense, but this is the same thing with Nyheim Hines. You never know when to start this guy. Like, that's why I never wanted to draft Nyheim Hines, because even though Frank Reich's like, draft this guy on your fantasy team, he knew he was going to get traded to the Bills at some point. I just don't believe in chasing a guy that I don't know what his role is going to be. I mean, they still used James Cook plenty last week with Nyheim Hines in the fold. He's returning punts. So how big is his role going to be on offense? Yeah, maybe he'll get a couple design looks. I know he had like a wheel route last week. Like, they targeted him downfield. Obviously didn't make the catch, but it's just, I'd rather just play another wide receiver, honestly. You know, someone with more upside than Nyheim Hines who might play like 10 snaps. You know, like similar to like a DeAndre Swift, except way less upside from just a playmaking standpoint.
Speaking of DeAndre Swift, let's move to Lions at Bears. Erickson, what's the key matchup?
Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Kyler Gordon in the slot. Look, if you still have not sent out a trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're not doing it right with fantasy football. Like, you need to trade for this guy right now, because the window for trading for him is going to be closed shut after this week. 31% target rate per route run this season, and against Kyler Gordon, who ranks second in catches and second in yards allowed from the slot this season, I just think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to have a day. I think that the Bears offense, who has one of the highest implied team totals on the slate, is going to put up massive points on this Detroit Lions defense. And that means the Lions are going to have opportunities to try to keep pace and have to keep pace. And St. Brown is their offense. With Swift banged up, Jamal Williams, yes, he's going to see opportunities at the goal line, but he's not necessarily going to move the ball between the 20s. That guy's going to be St. Brown here. So after getting 9 targets last week, a 38% target share, 84% of the air yards last week went to St. Brown. He's the only show in town, and I'm all in on the Sun God.
D-Bro, I feel like we haven't heard from you in like a half an hour. What's your key matchup in this one?
Well, to add to Erickson's point before I get on to my talking points here, I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, and an update, Josh Reynolds is not supposed to practice Friday, so he's not going to play again. But moving over to the Bears side, I'm with Erickson. I think the Bears are going to put up a ton of points. And I think that one of the players that I don't feel like we're point chasing here, people, and that's going to come along for the ride because the matchup is there. It was there last week, and I could not talk myself into Cole Kmet. But this week, I do think that he has a great chance to get in the box again, score another touchdown, probably finish as a top 12 tight end for the week against the Lions defense that has struggled. We know they struggle versus everything. Well, tight ends are no exception. 24th in EVA and DVOA against the position. They are 3rd in catch rate, 9th highest yards per reception allowed, and 4th most receiving touchdowns. So Cole Kmet, while He might feel gross to sit here and or like you're point chasing. I think he's going to have another good game here, guys.
Rest of season, where do you think Cole Kmet should be? Because obviously he was just like comically bad early in the year, but they're showing signs of life. The whole offense is showing a ton of signs of life. Do you think that's enough to make him a more comfortable guy to rank in the top? I don't even know. Where would you put him rest of the season?
I just pulled up my rest of season ranks because I was like, I've got to refresh my memory where I have him.
He's at 20th, across all of our experts.
I have him at 18th, so I'm pretty much in line. I mean, the problem is there's so many other guys that we're not, like, weekly rankings right now are not factoring, like, does David Njoku come back healthy? There's another few guys in that kind of mid tight end 2 to tight end 1 tier. Like, now we can talk about Noah Fant's resurgence. Evan Ingram's still in that conversation. Hayden Hurst. So while I like Kmet, and he could easily jump to the top of this pile, which would put him somewhere in the neighborhood of tight end 13 or 14, I still got to rank him probably because of volume and things like that in the more the mid tight end 2 range.
Let's get to Jaguars at Chiefs. D-Bro, what's the key matchup in this one?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit deeper with this because it would be easy for me to sit here and tell you that Travis Etienne's going to have a good game. Oh, Christian Kirk is going to have a good game. Things of that nature. But if you're hurting from bye weeks, Ryan, you talked about it, that all these winning teams and good fantasy assets are on bye. So if you're struggling, you need to look at Marvin Jones. And I get he's not young, and I get he's only had one good game all season. He could double that here. And I know that's not a lot. But my point is, and he is my bold prediction of the week, I think that he has a tangible upside here. High total game, great scoring environment. And if you look at what the Chiefs have not done well, they have not defended the deep ball. And the Jaguars' deep threat is Marvin Jones. He leads the team in deep targets. He's 12th on overall ADOT amongst all wide receivers. And the Chiefs versus deep balls. 8th in completion rate, 9th in deep receiving yards allowed. Plus, he's going to run half of his routes against Joshua Williams, who is allowed a 60% catch rate, 102 passer rating. If we're going to go off the board and you need flex help for this week, and I think he's going to be a big part of what the Jaguars do, it's Marvin Jones.
Our Fantasy Pros experts have Marvin Jones at 54th, 56th, 50th, 58th, and then D-Bro all the way up at 44th. So you are going out on a small limb with him, ranking him higher than the rest of the guys. Erickson, what are you looking at from the Chiefs side?
Looking at the Chiefs wide receivers in the slot against this Jacksonville secondary, because the secondary or the slot part of their defense is really where they've been weakest. Darius Williams has faced the second most targets in the slot this season, so that's how teams are attacking this defense. So you're going to keep starting Juju Smith-Schuster, 4th in the NFL in yards after the catch among wide receivers this year, and that's really where Jacksonville has been shredded. 4th in total yak allowed this season. Juju leads all Chiefs wide receivers in slot snaps this season, which means he's going to see a lot of Williams, but they mix it in a little bit of guys inside. Mecole Hardman has actually been more consistent than MVS over the last 4 weeks, 5 touches per game. He has more catches, targets, and yards than MVS, despite a 51% snap share to Valdez-Scantling's 72% snap share. So I really like the inside guys. And I just want to mention as well, Hardman has been on the injury report with an abdomen injury all week. He's missed practice. So we could be getting a Kadarius Toney breakout game, who we know from last year. This dude is electric with the ball in his hands. It can make guys miss like the best of them. So I know he only played 9 snaps last week, but we're going to expect that to increase. It was his first game with the team. Like, I would be very surprised if that's exactly what he sees again, but he still had 3 targets for 12 yards, all from the slot. So it would not surprise me at all. No, you don't need to start Toney this week, but make sure he's not on your waivers, because I think that we're going to be talking about him on the waiver show going into next week. Like, oh, you got to get Kadarius Toney breakout game against the Jags, because I could see that happening, especially if Mecole Hardman misses the game.
Just to note, Juju Smith-Schuster up to 20th in our rest of season rankings, and that's up 5 spots just in the last week. So his stock has been rising as of late and might continue to rise if he has another big one this week. Let's get into our next game, which is also our first pick in the over-under challenge. The over-under game is sponsored by No House Advantage, who are giving away $10,000 in weekly and season-long prizes, including a grand prize of $3,000. Check them out today at nohouseadvantage.com or download the app on the app stores. Use promo code PROS at first sign-up for a first deposit match up to $50. Our first over-under challenge of the day is Nick Chubb over or under 13 fantasy points against the Dolphins. So be on the lookout for that as the guys share their picks. and also some of their other favorite over-unders from this week's challenge throughout the show, which listeners can find at fantasypros.com/challenge. But for now, we'll turn to Erickson for his key matchup in Browns-Dolphins.
My key matchup is not about Nick Chubb because, you're obviously starting Nick Chubb all over the board. But, 13 fantasy points is insulting for a guy like Nick Chubb. He's been over that number in every single game he's played this year, except for once against the Patriots. So he's flying over the 13 fantasy points. So I'm taking the over on the no house advantage challenge. But my key matchup is talking about these Browns wide receivers against this Dolphins secondary, specifically looking at Donovan Peoples-Jones as a sleeper type of play. He ran more routes than Amari Cooper did in week 8. He's been super productive. He has over 70 receiving yards in his last 3 games, 81 receiving yards on 4 catches, 20% target share in week 8. So he better not be on your waiver wire. And if you need upside as a wide receiver 3, I do think Peoples-Jones can deliver against the Miami Dolphins defense. Ranks 4th worst in pass defense EPA. He's wide receiver 34 in points per game since week 4. And he actually also leads the Browns in receiving yards and catches. And the other thing too, I just want to mention it, like with Amari Cooper, he just has these really weird home road splits that are just, it's really hard to peg exactly why. It's like, Amari Cooper he like sleeping in his bed versus like sleeping at the hotel, and he's been automatic at home this year. He's never finished worse than wide receiver 24, but on the road he's never finished better than wide receiver 32. Now, I tried looking in to see if it was like cornerback matchups. Now, in the road games, he's faced guys like AJ Terrell, Marlon Humphrey, JC Horn. So maybe that has a little bit to do with it. But Peoples-Jones, because Cooper hasn't been as good on the road, Peoples-Jones has been really good on the road. 29% target share, 67 receiving yards, and just under 6 catches per game. So, no, you shouldn't bench Cooper in any way because his full season-long stats are too good. But it does buy into, hey, they'd like to feature Peoples-Jones a little bit more in the road games. I don't know why, but they do. And Peoples-Jones is trending in the right direction. So just another reason to back him as a wide receiver 3 play this week.
D-Bro, before you get into your matchup, I am going to also take the over on Nick Chubb 13 fantasy points. It's like the easiest over I think we've had all season. Usually I feel like on these overs, I always say like, well, they really aren't going to hit this number unless they get a touchdown. So you're basically just betting that they get a touchdown. That's not true with Nick Chubb. He could easily crush this number even without a touchdown.
It's too low.
I agree. It's the wrong number, frankly. It should have been like three points higher, or at least. So D-Bro, are you going to make it a clean sweep? And also, what's your key matchup?
Yeah, I'll make it a clean sweep. I think Nick Chubb, look, you can almost bank on Nick Chubb outside of like a few blips on the radar, getting 20 touches and running for 100 yards. So let's say, guys, he catches a pass and he takes it for 20 or 30 yards, which his explosive ability, he could easily get over this number without even sniffing the end zone, which I understand is a little bit of a reach, but his explosive ability, and he's one of the best runners in the NFL, it's not that much of a reach. But on the other side, look, I could tell you about Tyreek Hill, we could talk about Jalen Waddle, and nobody would learn anything because you're starting them regardless, because they're top 15, top 12 wide receivers. So I'm going to bring up a player that we have had a lot of questions about this week and what to do with him. And I'm telling you need to start it. And I mentioned on the Start Sit episode, start El Jefe with confidence. You look at it, took one game, people, for him to take over this backfield. He played 49% of the snaps. He tied Raheem Mostert in rushing share last week. He led the team out of the backfield in target share, routes, and red zone opportunities. I think we see Jeff Wilson assume more of this backfield this week in a smash matchup. Look at the Browns since week 4. We know that you can run on them, but here's the numbers for context about how bad they've been. 26th in rushing yards per game, 32nd in EPA per rush, and 27th in explosive run rate allowed. If Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, one of them underwhelms a little bit, it's because Jeff Wilson had himself a day. So I'm starting El Jefe and with confidence. He is a strong RB2 with upside and people can push back against that and say, really, with upside? He was the RB8 in fantasy last week. So yeah, there's upside there.
D-Bro, Raheem Mostert rest of season rankings is 22nd. Jeff Wilson is 30th. Doesn't it seem like those should be closer?
Those should be flipped, to be honest. I have Jeff Wilson, and I need to continue updating mine. Yeah, I still have Raheem ahead of Jeff Wilson. Now I'm going to update this live for people right now. I'm going to move. Where did you say people have him at?
Mostert in the consensus is 22nd, and Wilson is 30th.
I'm shifting Mostert down to, I'm going to put him at RB 30, and I have Wilson at RB 19. And people could say that's insane, but if you think it's insane, one, you didn't see that Jeff Wilson already took over the backfield last week. Number two, you need to go look at what the rest of the season schedule, because I saw some of the YouTube comments and things like that. And people are like, did that man really say that Jeff Wilson could be a league winner? And I'm like, he's in one of the top 5 offenses in the NFL in points. Unless you're projecting Tua gets hurt, they're going to keep scoring a lot of points. So he's going to be in the red zone constantly. And if he owns this backfield, yes, he could be a league winner.
Yeah, it's bold, but I think it's definitely doable. Let's move to Texans at Giants. And Deber, I'll stick with you for your key matchup.
So I think if the Texans have a chance in this game, they need to stay away from the strength of this Giants defense. So we know they blitz a lot. We know they have a great secondary. I think it's going to have to be with a ton of Dameon Pierce. And the man has shown he can tote the rock, and he has been extremely good in doing so. He's the RB14 in fantasy. He hasn't finished lower than the RB20 guys since week 3. Now, you look at where I talked about the strength of the Giants defense. Their Achilles heel is their run defense. They're 26th in rushing yards per game, 25th in EPA per rush, and 28th in explosive run rate. Dameon Pierce could easily have himself a day and finish the week as a top 5 back. If he does that, the Texans have a shot to at least, if not win this game, keep it really close.
What are you looking at in this one, Erickson?
I start Saquon Barkley next game. No, I'm not going to just leave it at that. I'm going to look at Daniel Jones here in the Giants, passing game, as underwhelming as it is, because, we know that this offense is going to move the ball through Saquon Barkley, expecting 30 touches, maybe 200 yards from scrimmage, probably in that range. Yeah, you want to start Saquon in your DFS lineups for sure. But Daniel Jones, I think, is a serviceable streamer this week. He has that rushing floor, 8 carries for 45 rushing yards per game this season. He's 3rd in QB scramble yards, 6th in design rushing yards. So I think the rushing floor combined with the matchup against the Texans, I get that their pass defense, the counting stats don't look at this, this is a smash spot, because they give up all their production on the ground. Now, Daniel Jones obviously plays a role in that because he does use his legs as part of his fantasy appeal. He's QB 16 in points per game, so that's kind of where I think you should kind of view him. Obviously, with teams on bye week, he gets moved up a little bit inside the top 15. So I think if you want a floor play at quarterback, I think Daniel Jones is definitely safe, because when the Texans have actually had to defend the pass, they've not been efficient, stopping at 8th highest yards per attempt allowed, 5th highest yards per completion allowed this season. So taking a dart throw at a guy like Rondale Robinson or Darius Slayton as a wide receiver 4, I think is fine. Rondale probably has a higher floor just because he sees more targets, but very close to the line of scrimmage, whereas Darius Slayton can make big plays downfield, so he's more of the ceiling spot. But in terms of Daniel Jones in the under-over no house advantage challenge, I'm going to go under at 17 fantasy points. I think that's just a lot for Daniel Jones. Now, you could get burned because he could run for an 80-yard touchdown, and then you just get, oh well, similar to what Marcus Mariota did last week. But he's only scored more than 17 fantasy points once this season. So when you give me the line at 18 fantasy points, then I'm just going to take the under.
Who's scoring more fantasy points, Daniel Jones or Nick Chubb?
Oh, man. They're just go with Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I'll go Nick Chubb, but I'm taking the over for Daniel Jones. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I think that he has a good game this week.
All right, let's move to Saints at Steelers. Erickson, key matchup.
I'm looking at these Steelers I'm looking at the Steelers receivers versus the Saints pass defense. So the main guy obviously is not Deontay Johnson. I'm actually looking at George Pickens, who's actually led the Steelers in receiving yards since week 4. You're moving Chase Claypool from the lineup here, and I think it's going to open up more opportunities for George Pickens to be more involved. He's already had a full-time role on the offense this season, so it's not necessary that he's going to see more playing time, but he can take advantage of a Saints pass defense that has been leaky at times without Marshawn Lattimore. So I think that Kenny Pickett coming off the bye week, I think the Steelers passing offense is going to be much better. They can't run the football. They're already talking about using Jalen Warren more than Najee Harris because their offensive line can't run block. So I think they're going to put the ball in Kenny Pickett's hands to make some plays downfield with these talented wide receivers, specifically with George Pickens. So I'm excited for him.
Really quickly, what do you think Pickett's ceiling is the rest of the season now that Chase Claypool has been traded away?
I mean, I don't think it's too aggressive to think about looking at some of these second half rookie performances from guys like Elijah Moore, like a Brandon Ayuk, and seeing that when we're listing off George Pickens next year, we're like, okay, well, from after the Chase Claypool trade, did you know that George Pickens was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver? Like, I think that's in his range of outcomes, honestly, because Deontay Johnson has been very inefficient with his targets, 5 yards per target basically all year long. His targets aren't going to go up. Like, he's already seeing double-digit targets per game, so that's not going to increase. Whereas Pickens, he's already been efficient on his low target volume, and now the volume is going to increase because Chase Claypool is out of the lineup. So I think Pickens is a buy right now. You should go trade for him. I said so on TikTok, so you want to make sure you do it, because I think that, especially with this schedule coming up for the Steelers, second best for wide receivers, I think that Pickens is going to be someone that could be a low-key league winner when it's all said and done.
D-Bro, I know you want to talk about your boy Chris Olave. I just traded for Chris Olave in my home family league. I gave away Dameon Pierce because I also have Saquon and Etienne and Kenneth Walker. So it
so quiet flex. Okay.
It made sense. Well, but most of my leagues are not doing quite well, as you well know in our Dynasty League.
I hope the family members are listening to the show.
At least one of them is, and she's not happy that I'm in first. So, so talk to me about Chris Olave.
So I'm going to share Erickson's George Pickens love. First of all, I'm taking the over and the no house under, if I could say words right now, challenge. I love Pickens this week, and I think if the Saints are going to keep pace with, I think it's going to be a really good game for Kenny Pickett. I think it's going to have to be with Chris Olave. And you look at Olave, he has had no qualms, no problems, assuming the number one spot in the Saints passing attack. Wide receiver 16, we know he's been gobbling up targets, but 27% target shares, top 15 amongst all wide receivers. And if you look at the Steelers, their coverage type, they have religiously been more of a zone team. This year, they're running more man. In week 8, 58 to 61% of their outside corner snaps were in man coverage. Olave has been shredding every zone defense out there. He is also awesome against man coverage. He has the 9th highest PFF receiving grade. He's 21st in yards per route run, immediately ahead of Jalen Waddle. If I can get words out right now, good Lord, I'm talking about too many Steelers. I'm not talking about Warren. Jalen Waddle. So I think that we're going to see a really good game again out of Chris Olave.
Yeah, he's been just so fun to watch take the league by storm already, like as a rookie. It just looks different when guys come in and already look like they're 10-year vets, and he certainly fits that bill.
He's an alpha.
Let's move to Broncos at Titans. Erickson, what's the key matchup here?
Looking at the Denver passing game, the wide receivers and tight ends against this Titans pass defense, because so far this season, Russell Wilson obviously been very underwhelming. 2.6% touchdown rate is egregiously below his career average of 6.2%. Basically just looking in the mirror, oh no, what's going on, Russell Wilson? Basically the offense has stalled significantly in the red zone. Third worst red zone second worst red zone offense this season. But I think that the Titans present a matchup where the Denver Broncos are going to have to throw to score points. 83% touchdown rate allowed this season through the air. No team has allowed a higher percentage of scores than the Titans through passing. They're a quintessential pass funnel defense, number one in pass play rate faced this year. So I do think they're going to be volume for the Denver Broncos wide receivers and tight ends, most specifically with Courtland Sutton. Look, wide receiver 22 in expected fantasy points per game this season, 7th in expected receiving touchdowns. He leads the Broncos with 9 red zone targets, but has scored just once. Positive regression is going to come, just like it came for Joe Mixon. Everyone said Joe Mixon sucked, and then he scored 5 touchdowns because positive regression is a thing, especially when you face a bad defense that gives up those types of scores. So I'm telling you, to start Courtland Sutton, 3rd most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers overall this year, the most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers on the perimeter, where Courtland Sutton runs the vast majority of his routes. So I'm in on Sutton, and the same thing with Greg Dulcich, the tight end for the Denver Broncos. Look, he has been a stud in his first 3 NFL games. He's averaging over 4 receptions for 81 receiving yards. I think that he is someone that he's in the top 6 in terms of ECR this week. I have him ranked 6. He's top 7, I believe, in ECR. I mean, he ran around on 91% of the dropbacks in week 8. That is like top 3 type tight end usage that you see from guys like Travis Kelce, like not from rookie tight ends. So Greg Dulcich is entering prime territory. Make sure he's not on your waiver wire, and you want to start him basically over any non-elite tight end this week.
Erickson, you have Courtland Sutton 23rd this week. If you really had any conviction whatsoever, you would have him first and be predicting 5 more touchdowns from him. I'm really disappointed in you. Let's move to Debro for your pick.
I love the slow burn that Erickson. I was like, come on, he's gonna say Courtland Sutton. He's gonna say, there it is. Let's go. I share his optimism for Courtland Sutton. And on the other side, I know this is the name everybody's expecting, but come on.
There's nobody else.
There's nobody.
Who are you going to mention that anybody cares about in Tennessee besides Derrick Henry?
There's nobody else. Like, wait, who? Like, Ryan Tannehill was looking at playing. You still feel good about going with Robert Woods? No. Is there a tight end outside of nobody that you want to start in Tennessee? No. It's Derrick Henry, baby, and that's why I'm going to take the over and the no house advantage over-under challenge for him. I mean, we got to be hitting overs for Derrick Henry. I was wrong, big dog. I'm sorry. I apologize. I told people to fade him. I'll take the L on that. And I think look, Derrick Henry has rattled off 5 straight 100-yard rushing games. Yes, you heard that right. Now I think he's going to make it a 6th versus a Denver run defense, which you can run the ball against. They're 21st in rushing yards per game, 20th in EPA per rush, and could see some big runs out of Derrick Henry. 31st in open field yards. So big dog, he's got to eat.
Okay, first of all, former Maryland Terrapin great Chig Okonkwo doesn't appreciate you saying there are no good tight ends in Tennessee. But yes, you're not starting.
Jake Who? What?
Chig
Who's that?
Okonkwo.
Oh, okay. Never heard of him.
He had the big catch last week, the only one.
He actually leads
Did
the
you
team
mean
in
the big
targets
catch? You
the
mean like
last
the
2
three?
weeks.
The three.
It's all relative when you're talking about the Titans passing.
Yeah,
game.
This is fair. This is fair.
All right, let's get to the late afternoon slate. Colts at Raiders. Erickson, what's the key matchup?
Oh, man. Just looking at this Colts offense and what's it going to be? Run game, pass game. I don't know what we're going to see against this Raiders defense. I mean, it's not a good situation for really any of these Colts players. Michael Pittman, 30% target share with Sam Ehlinger at the quarterback for the last 2 weeks. He has 10 catches for 75 yards on 15 targets. That's 5 yards per target. That is not good. I do not want to start Michael Pittman. He's basically turning into Deontay Johnson, who has just been not productive, especially in half-point or standard formats. Indy's offensive line is allowing the 5th highest pressure rate this season and sack conversion rate. It's all the reasons you need if you need to stream a defense. Raiders DST. I get, like, they have not been good, but in this particular matchup, look, Max Crosby is good. Like, I know that, and I know Chandler Jones is better than his numbers have shown this year, so I would have faith in those guys bringing home some pressure to Sam Ehlinger and getting pressure, creating sacks, turnovers for this Raiders DST as a streaming option. For the Colts on offense, I think that with Jeff Saturday coming in as the head coach, you have Parks Frazier is going to be the team's play caller for the first time ever. He's never called plays before at the NFL level. I think, Jeff Saturday as an offensive lineman coming in, I have to imagine he looks at this team, he's like, you know what? Let's give the ball to Jonathan Taylor because I don't know anything else about what we're supposed to do on offense with a passing game, with a quarterback that can't throw the ball downfield. So Deion Jackson right now is hurt. I don't think he's going to play. He's missed practice all week. Jonathan Taylor practiced on full on Thursday. So I think if you have Taylor on your team, you're going to start him. And you're just going to pray that he's not hurt and not injured and that he gets enough volume in this matchup to be efficient. Now, the Raiders defense has kind of been so-so against the run, the 3rd fewest rushing yards before contact, but they have been beaten by some of the better running backs in the league. If Jonathan Taylor is upright and healthy, then he should have a decent game here against the Raiders.
Yeah, unless you are blessed like I am in my home family league to have Etienne and Saquon and Kenneth Walker, then I think you're probably not in a position where you can sit Jonathan Taylor. But outside of that, like, I don't know how you could possibly start anybody in this offense in the first game of the Jeff Saturday era, just with all the insanity going around that franchise right now and just how poor Ehlinger has looked. I just think, yeah, it's an obvious stay away from anybody other than Jonathan Taylor. Debra, what are you looking at in this one?
Well, on the other side, the Raiders' offense isn't looking too good, guys. They're dropping like flies. Darren Waller, IR. Hunter Renfrow, IR. Derek Carr and Devontae Adams apparently fighting in the locker room. I think that this offense is going to just lean on Josh Jacobs this week. I think that looking at, and this leans into the matchup as well, the Colts have been a run funnel since about week 4. Over that span, 20th in rushing yards allowed per game, 17th in explosive run rate, and 22nd in open field yards. So we've seen Jacobs. He's been up and down. He has not had a big game in a few weeks. Start him with confidence. I think he's going to get fed. I think you're looking at close to 30 touches in this game. If the Raiders want to win this, and they need to win to try to, save the locker room and any type of confidence for the rest of their season, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be the reason.
Yeah, I was going to ask about sort of how he hasn't had that blow-up game in a few weeks because he had those 3 straight games where he finishes RB1, RB3, and RB1. Outside of those 3 games, which came back-to-back-to-back, and one of them was against the Texans, which everybody is an RB1 against, he hasn't been higher than RB17 all season long. So not that it's like a panic meter is the wrong way to put it, but is there any hesitation from you in thinking about him as a top 10 running back rest of the season when he hasn't been that outside of 1 3-game stretch?
I think there's definitely pause to have, but if you look at the offense now, I mean, can we say that his target share possibly goes up if he's playing all the snaps and stuff? I mean, the short area targets are theirs for him to have because Devontae Adams, Mac Hollins have been running deep routes. No Darren Waller. I mean, maybe Foster Moreau gets an uptick, but not much. I think Jacobs is going to possibly assume the more consistent check down role and more consistent number 2 role in this passing attack.
That's fair. Let's move to Cowboys at Packers, which I've been just making fun of all week, how badly Fox wants to make this a big game. It does not look like one with the way the Packers have been playing. D-Row, what's your key matchup?
I think Dallas wins this game, and I think it's going to be because of Dak Prescott. The Packers' pass defense has been up and down. They've had their good games, but overall, this is a defense that's pretty middle of the road, guys. Like they're 17th in yards per attempt allowed. They've allowed the 12th highest passing touchdown rate. And Dak Prescott, with as much play action passing as they use, can eviscerate the Packers secondary. Dak Prescott over his last 2 games is utilizing play action on almost half of his dropbacks. Over that span, he's top 10 in basically any metric you look at. Play action passing grade, yards per attempt, and adjusted play action completion rate. Now, Green Bay versus play action, I mean, they're bad. They're terrible. 10th in play action completion rate, 5th in play action passer rating. So Dak Prescott, I think, is in for a good game here.
Erickson, the Packers offense has been gross all year long.
Oof.
Is there any optimism here for any of these players?
You can start Alan Lazard. Like that's probably the guy I feel best about. And you're probably going to have to start Aaron Jones if you have him, even though he's dealing with this ankle injury. And I mean, if Aaron Jones is ruled out before this game, I know he's been limited this week. They've been optimistic, but every coaching staff is optimistic. Just ask the Raiders. Oh yeah, Darren Waller, he'll play. Like yeah, no worry. Oh, he's on IR. Like we've seen running backs come back from ankle injuries like this season, and they've all been horrible. Like it's just not a situation you want to be in. So I would try to get away from Aaron Jones, and it's not like he's also playing the Lions. Like he has a horrible matchup against the Cowboys, allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points and receptions per game to running backs. So if he's hobbled in any way, he's going to split carries with A.J. Dillon, who's probably the healthier of the 2 backs. A.J. Dillon has been bottom 15 in rushing EPA added this season. So even if Jones is ruled out and A.J. Dillon's slated to be, he's going to be the bell cow. You know what you do? Instead of starting him, you immediately put him on your trade block and you trade him to someone, or the Aaron Jones manager be like, hey, you want an RB1? Like, take A.J. Dillon, because I would be on the side of he's probably going to underwhelm even with a bigger role. We could probably see Kylan Hill involved to some extent. It's just this Packers offense is not creating any type of favorable situation for really any of its playmakers, if you can even really use that as a word, because nobody's making plays on this offense at all, really, besides Alan Lazard. So for me, I'm really out on this Packers backfield as I can be. Start Alan Lazard because he is the alpha in this offense, the only guy that Aaron Rodgers is really trusting downfield, and still the matchup is horrible across the board against this elite Dallas run defense.
The Cowboys are ranked by DVOA as the number 1 defense overall in football. So this is like it's a really bad offense and it's a really good defense. Just it's not going to be fun if you have any of these players in your lineup except for maybe Lazard. Let's get to our last late afternoon game, Cardinals at Rams. Steve, what's the key matchup?
I think it's going to be another great week for Rondale Moore. You look at where you attack the Rams secondary, and it's across the middle. It's in the slot. Rondale Moore has been the wide receiver 36 in fantasy points per game. He's been a wide receiver 2 or better in half of his games. He's got over 20% target share, and again, attacking the inside. Troy Hill, who is a cornerback we've picked on this year religiously in other seasons, 60% catch rate, 93 pass rating allowed. I think that you look at Rondale Moore, not only versus the slot, but the Rams can't tackle. Like, they've been allowing a lot of yak this year. The top 12 in yak allowed. That's where Rondale Moore makes his money. 3rd in yak per reception. So another big Rondale Moore week.
Erickson, what are you looking at?
Looking at Tyler Higbee against this Arizona Cardinals defense, I mean, the Cardinals have been the quintessential match or the key matchup you want to target for tight ends. Most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this season. And I think that's why you should go back to Tyler Higbee. I know he's been disappointing over the last couple games, but one of the games he was hurt in, he only saw one target in week 9, but he still played 79% of the snaps. He ran around on 61% of the dropbacks. I expect those to increase against the Arizona Cardinals. You know, their defense, like I mentioned, just ranks dead last in every single receiving category for tight ends. And if Stafford plays, I cannot imagine him, let's throw the ball to Van Jefferson more, because that has not been working whatsoever. Van Jefferson still has 0 catches on the season despite having 200 air yards. So whether it's Stafford, whether it's John Wolford under center, I don't think Van Jefferson, especially in a matchup where the Cardinals just shut down the perimeter. That's why tight ends are so good against the Cardinals, because they're forcing everything inside. So I think Higbee is just going to stumble into production, similar to what we saw earlier in the season. Higbee's not a game difference-making tight end, and obviously that's why you have him having some struggles as of late. But I think he's going to get volume here, and at tight end, that's good enough for me.
Very quickly, Erickson, is there any chance Cam Akers becomes startable again in this offense by the end of the season?
I don't think any Rams running back is going to be startable in this back. The offensive line is just so bad, and the fact that McVay is not even committing to one guy. If one guy was seeing all the snaps, then it's maybe it's a Devin Singletary situation where the role's not great, but he's playing all the snaps. So he's getting enough work. And now you have Kyron Williams potentially coming back. So that's another question mark of what's his role going to be now in this offense? You know, it's just a different guy every week that Sean McVay's let's feature this player. Right now it's just too muddled of a mess, and the offensive line is just so bad that none of these running backs can be successful.
Let's move to Sunday Night Football. Chargers at 49ers. Erickson, sticking with you for the key matchup.
I'm looking at Justin Herbert against this elite San Francisco 49ers defense, and I am very concerned about Justin Herbert in this Chargers offense. So Herbert leads the NFL in completions per game at 29 and ranks second in passing attempts, right under 44 per game. The 49ers defense is allowing the 5th fewest passing yards per game while generating the league's 3rd highest pressure rate. So what that tells me is it's just going to be more dump-off passes to Austin Eckler all game long, and that's not translating to fantasy success for Justin Herbert. When you're averaging under 7 yards per attempt as a guy with a massive bazooka for an arm, it's not helping him in fantasy. Last week, he was the QB 18 against the Atlanta Falcons, the league's worst pass defense. Now he's actually facing a good pass defense. So I am very concerned. Vegas is concerned. LA has a 20-point implied team total, which ranks 19th on the slate for the Los Angeles Chargers. I never imagined seeing it ever that low for an offense led by Justin Herbert, but that's just kind of telling you what the outlook for him is in this particular matchup. And I'm trying to get away from Herbert if I have him as my starting quarterback. There are much better options. I mean, Daniel Jones, he's getting Kenny Golladay back. Oh baby, wheels up for Danny Dimes. I mean, I'm trying to get away from Herbert, and I'm more concerned about Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, Michael Bandy. Yes, those guys hit last week because they were playing the Falcons. They're not playing the Falcons this week. So I would temper expectations with all those guys in this Chargers offense as a whole.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Debro, what are you looking at here?
So we know that Christian McCaffrey's going to have a good game, and nobody needs to tell anybody about that. But the player that has been up and down all season long, and you're probably, if you have hair, you're pulling it out. I can't do that, but sadly. But if you have George Kittle, you should feel good about it. Start him this week. Obviously, you're probably going to be doing that anyway, but I think the expectation should be that he comes through with a really good game. The Chargers are 20th in DVOA, allowing the 4th highest yards per reception and the 9th most fantasy points to inline tight ends. We know George Kittle is a massive inline tight end. 54% of his snaps come from the inline spot. So I think it's going to be a good George Kittle game. Outside of, yes, Christian McCaffrey is going to smash. I, too, cannot wait to see his legendary box score against this terrible Chargers run defense.
Let's move to Monday Night Football. Commanders at Eagles. Washington just continues to not be able to get out of their own way. Off the field, on the field, can they get out of their own way against the Eagles? Debro, what's the key matchup?
Jalen Hurts, baby. Jalen Hurts. Just another game. Another game, guys. On the way as a dark horse MVP candidate. Love that man, and he's going to crush this week. Specifically with the Eagles utilizing play action so much. He has used it at the 5th highest rate in the NFL, most play action passing touchdowns, 4th most play action passing yards, and yes, we know that the Commanders' secondary is not good. A big part of that has been against play action. 7th highest play action yards per attempt, and 10th highest play action passer rating. So Jalen Hurts continuing the Eagles to that undefeated season, baby.
Erickson, what are you looking at?
All right, the Eagles are not going undefeated. As
also, really quickly, you said dark horse MVP candidate. Is Hurts even dark horse anymore?
I mean, what's his odds right now, Warmly?
I mean, if the team goes undefeated, then he has to win. Like,
I mean, Josh Allen's probably still the favorite. Maybe he's dropped. You're going to make me have to Google this while I filibuster.
With the injury, I would guess Josh Allen, there's maybe a little, hesitation there on him as the favorite. I think it's probably Patrick Mahomes, but Hurts has to be top 3 right now, right? I wouldn't consider that dark horse.
Well, the thing with Josh Allen that's interesting is if Case Keenum goes out and the Bills just are horrible, that actually increases Josh Allen's MVP because look how bad they were without Josh Allen. But if Case Keenum plays well,
but it never actually plays out like that, right? Like last year, the Ravens were the 1 seed, and then Lamar went out and they went winless the rest of the way. It's not like he won from that, but
to each their own. All right, I'm going to go with the Commanders wide receivers against this Eagles secondary. I'm going right to my matchup. I hate this matchup for all of Washington wide receivers. It's brutal. I think it's the league's number 1 secondary. Looking at the cornerbacks that they have there, all top 20 per PFF, 3rd in pass defense EPA, and in passing yards allowed per game. And they're playing with leads in all their games. They're undefeated, like we mentioned. So teams are throwing on them, and they're not even getting to 200 passing yards. So I think that McLaurin, Curtis Samuel are guys you want to stay away from. Even if you look at McLaurin's box score from the last time he played them, 6 catches for 102 yards on 9 targets, you're like, oh man, I got to play McLaurin. He was good against them. He had 1 target in the first half of that game, and nearly half of his yards came on 1 45-yard catch, while everything else came in garbage time. So do not be fooled by McLaurin's stat line the last time these teams played, and don't trust Curtis Samuel either. 15% target share in his last 2 games. He's averaging just 4 targets per game, 6 total receptions for 115 yards. I mean, Curtis Samuel and 19.1 yards per catch just don't mesh together because we know that's not real. The fact that he scored that big play last week that had him finish as a top 10 wide receiver because the ref basically just knocked out one of the defenders. Don't chase that, please. Curtis Samuel is just it's a bad play this week, honestly. So I would try to get away from him, especially with Jahan Dotson practicing this week. So just another guy kind of thrown into the fold that's creating more concerns about, okay, how are the targets distributed in this offense? So I would really just try my best to get away from these Washington pass catchers.
Yeah, I was about to mention Jahan Dotson did practice, on Friday. So assuming he's back, I am still assuming you're not starting him, though.
No, I mean, look, we started him when the Washington Commanders were throwing the ball a ton and he was catching touchdowns every single week and they were playing really bad defenses. That is no longer the case. So you kind of have to look past what Jahan Dotson did. Obviously, you're excited about it for a dynasty owner. Dotson flash, that's good, but he's the number 3 option on a bad offense in a horrible matchup. That's what matters.
Debro did look it up. Hurts is 2nd in MVP odds right now, behind only Patrick Mahomes, thus justifying my confusion.
I mean, Tyreek Hill should actually be. Tyreek Hill's actually the MVP, though. Let's be honest here. He should be.
But it's just never going to happen again.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying, he is the MVP, though. Let's be really here.
They just need to rename that. That's a quarterback award, basically.
Yeah. He'll get Offensive Player of the Year.
Exactly, the MVP for not quarterbacks.
Yes,
he'll get every other award that exists, just not MVP. No.
Just another reminder: the 4 teams on bye this week: Patriots, Jets, Bengals, and Ravens. Let's open up the mailbag here to end the show. It's a good time to remind the listeners that if they want even more access to our analysts, please be sure to join us on Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. A premium subscription will get listeners full access to our analysts through AMAs, stages, and more. Our question this week is, who is a sneaky tight end that might be available on waivers right now? Erickson, I'll start with you.
I'm going back to Juwan Johnson. We've talked about him at times on the podcast this year, and, he seems to just kind of always come through. I get a lot of it's coming garbage time where he's just catching these random yard touchdowns, but he's still delivering, and we saw his usage last week, 83% route participation in week 9. That's really good for a tight end. I know he only had 2 targets, but he still caught the 41-yard touchdown, and he plays a lot. Like, that's really what we're looking for with some of these tight ends. I mean, you look at the Steelers, what are they bad against? They rank dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers in the slot. Now, Juwan Johnson's not a wide receiver. He's a tight end, but when he first came out, he actually was a wide receiver. So the fact that he runs 50% of his routes from the slot, he ranks 5th in receiving yards, 5th in catch rate, and 3rd in passer rating targeted from the slot this season. Look, behind Chris Olave, who is stepping up for the Saint? I mean, maybe if Jarvis Landry comes back, maybe. But Callaway's not stepping up. Traquan's not stepping up. So Juwan Johnson's really been like the number 2 pass catcher for the Saints this season. So I think he's a sneaky ad because he has actually delivered a bunch of decent games so far this year.
Debra, how about from you?
So I'll push back a little bit because I know Erickson wasn't high on this player this coming week. And it's Dawson Knox. I think if Case Keenum is under center, you've looked at the Minnesota Vikings defense. They've struggled versus tight ends. They're 22nd in DVOA. They're top 10 in catch rate, yards per reception, and touchdowns allowed. So I think he's an easy guy to sit here and look at. Okay, do I stream him this week? But honestly, I think that with his usage trending up, because last week his route run rate eclipsed 70% for only the second time this season. And a lot of that's had to do with health. Like, we could rewind and go back to Dawson Knox was continually on the injury report to start the season. We're like, okay, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And he's not a sexy name, but he's got some other good matchups upcoming. After the Vikings, they'll get the Lions, then they get the Patriots, who retired for the most receiving touchdowns allowed to tight ends, then the Dolphins, who just gave up a really good game versus Cole Kmet. So I think there's some really good streamable weeks for Dawson Knox ahead and this week.
We'll wrap it up there, fellas. Thank you both for another awesome episode. Everybody listening, please remember to check out Autopilot to get your team optimized each and every week of the season. Most of all, thank you, the fans, for listening. For Erickson and Debro, I'm Ryan Wormley. We'll see you again soon.